What is up, ladies and gentlemen? It is Monday. Welcome back to the Die Hard MMA podcast. I am your host, as always. I am Clint. We are back, and we have the biggest fight of 2020 so far staring us right in the face, and I can't wait to get down on this thing. Let's talk about bets, let's talk about action, some fighter picks. Let's do our very best to make some money this week. How is everybody doing in the chat today? We've got David Massage Therapy in here early. We've got Christopher Harmon, Bufo on the beat, my friend. Michael Lunday, huge shout out to you, my friend, as well. We've got Sappho619 on Instagram, Kenneth Wall, the Gaming Wolf 87. We've got the usual suspects in here. Aiden Samo. That name doesn't ring a bell. If it's your first time or if I've just missed you before, welcome to the show. Glenn the Banker. OJCE, I think is how you're going to pronounce that. How's everybody doing? I'm pumped. I am beyond pumped, and I'm looking a little bit fresher today. Your boy got a new light over in the corner, so now I've got some dual lighting action going on. It really brings out the shininess of the head. Well, you are all in for a treat because I am on my rampage of having awesome guests here on the show for you today. We are joined by none other than Matt Holt, the president of U.S. Integrity, hanging out with us on the show today. Matt, how you doing, buddy?
Clint, how's it going?
It's going. Unfortunately, coming off a little bit of a down week last week, but I am pumped up for this card. How are you?
I'm great. It's hard to be any more pumped up for this card. You know, this is the main event we've been talking about for so long. And, I think most MMA experts agree, look, if anyone's going to derail Khabib, then Gaethje might be the guy. And that's what really makes this card exciting, along with the fact that it is just absolutely stacked from top to bottom with meaningful fights.
Absolutely. The fights have meaning. They've got stories. The lines aren't half bad. There's a lot of ways that this card is really, really awesome. And I personally just can't wait to dive right on into it. I do have to really quickly jump on this thing and say, once again, I'm down. I had a minus 2.1 unit event last weekend. The track record looks a whole lot worse than it really is. I played a whole lot of little props for zero.1 and 0.2 unit sprinkles, so it looks awful when you look at the right and the wrong picks, but most of the wrong picks were little shots as opposed to the big ones, and my whole night would have just been turned around, man, if Jillian Robertson had thrown a few more elbows at the end of round 3.
Yeah, one of those weeks. What saved me is the same old main event over. I mean, that has been the most successful wagering trend since COVID started. Main event overs.
I'm right there with you. I hit the over 2.5 at plus 105, and I'm I always do my best to learn from my mistakes. And even on last week's podcast, I don't know if you saw it, I said that I was very interested in playing every single over on the board. I was going to lay the chalk for the over 1.5, play the over 2.5. The over 3.5 was a big, nice plus line. The over 4.5 was a juicy, juicy bet. If you hit the first two, you're free rolling on the second two, and then play the fight goes all the way to decision. And when the time came to lay the chalk down, I just couldn't quite sack up to pull it off, Matt. Now I'm sitting here kicking myself.
Yeah, look. If you have these great ideas, you got to follow through with them, right? It's all about execution.
Yep, you just gotta pull the trigger and do it sometimes. I couldn't quite get there, but let's roll on into this fight week. We've got such a big card. I don't want to spend too much time lamenting last week because we got a lot to talk about, man. First fight of the evening, we've got Joel Alvarez taking on Alexander Yakovlev. Joel is 17-2. Yakovlev is 24-9. And the secret on my boy Joel Alvarez is out. Last time out, we hit him as a plus 280 dog against Joe Duffy. And now the bookmakers have damn near overcorrected. They've got him sitting as a large favorite against Alexander Yakovlev. And you know what? I'm going to go ahead and double check this. Let me refresh my page here. Joel Alvarez was about minus 200 maybe 15 minutes ago. He's sitting at minus 155 right now. So huge swing on Alexander Yakovlev just this afternoon. Talk to me about this fight, Matt.
Well, you know what's interesting is both of these guys are big, tall welterweights. Both of them are over 6 feet tall, which you don't always get for 170 pounders. The only thing I worry a little bit is I think the best part of Yakovlev's game, who's certainly aging, and he doesn't have that speed. While he certainly still has power in his punches, I don't know that his striking technique is as crisp enough at 36 years old for him to stand and bang with some of the more young, athletic guys in the division. But his submission game is still really strong. He's still crafty. And my only worry here about Alvarez, who's mostly a submission grappler, is does he dive right down into the ground with a really crafty submission grappler and find himself in a tough spot? I stayed away from this one.
Okay. I can see that, and I'm getting some comments here in the chat that I'm a little choppy, I'm a little laggy, so I'm gonna pop myself out and right back in real quick and see if that fixes.
Okay.
I don't know what's going on. Maybe that's a little bit better. Some technical issues today. I apologize, people. Yeah, this is one that I'm actually very interested on the Joel Alvarez side, even with the money coming against him the other way. I haven't really been overly impressed with Alexander Yakovlev in his UFC career thus far. He's got a lot of experience, but so does Joel Alvarez. I mean, he's got nearly 20 fights under his belt at this point, and Joel Alvarez is going to have a 3-inch reach advantage. He's best on the ground. His striking is really a work in progress, but he seems like he added a wrinkle with those kicking attacks. He's got these big, heavy leg kicks. He likes to stay at range, and Yakovlev is just so low output. When he's on the feet, he does next to nothing, and then he looks to take it to the ground. I feel like Yakovlev almost plays right into Joel Alvarez's hands.
Yeah, the only thing that worries me is the experience level. So we're talking about a guy in Yakovlev who, while he is 3-5 in the UFC, and certainly, that record speaks for itself. But look at some of the people that he's lost to: a decision to Roosevelt Roberts in his last fight, a loss to Kamaru Usman, the reigning defending welterweight champion, a loss to Damian Maia by decision. I mean, basically all these ground guys: Usman, Damian Maia, Roosevelt Roberts, not Zach Cummings, Nicholas Musaki. None of them actually were able to submit him. He went the distance with all of them. So this is a tough guy, and I just wonder if this turns into a grappling exchange. A lot of times you get judges; they're all over the place. Sometimes it just ends up who's on top in these grappling exchanges. That's kind of how it gets, graded by the judges. So I'm always a little bit nervous about laying the chalk in a what I expect to be a grappling exchange here, as the judges aren't always that experienced in how they judge basically an entire ground-based fight.
Yeah, I can get with you there. I totally understand that. And the judges have been highly questionable this time around in Fight Island. They don't seem to be agreeing with a lot of what we're seeing. One final comment I want to make on Yakovlev is I've noticed he puts himself in bad spots. He sticks his neck out there a little too far. He is right there for the taking with, guillotines and Darce chokes. And I've just seen him give up some very, very questionable positions. And if this fight does hit the ground, I think that's something you can't do against Joel Alvarez. I'm very tempted now that the line has dropped more in my favor here on Joel Alvarez. Do you have an official pick or a bet on this one that you're planning on making, or is this a nice little pass for you to start the night?
Yeah, this is a pass for me.
Okay. And I totally understand that. I'm going to have to do a little bit more research. Alvarez is a guy that I've been interested in betting, and we'll see. That's one that I'm going to have to put a pin in it. We'll see.
I don't like betting on guys after one performance that I think isn't applicable to this performance. So, I mean, Alvarez's best performance came against Joe Duffy, and Joe Duffy's really renowned. He has a win over Conor McGregor, so everybody knows who he is. And he goes in there as a huge dog and pulls the upset in basically Duffy's retirement fight. Mm-hmm. And now all of a sudden he's a big favorite. And I don't always, first of all, I don't like – Duffy was a striker. The games aren't necessarily applicable here and how the fights are going to go. And I don't like taking a guy who is an almost 3-1 dog and suddenly making him a 2-1 favorite. That's a big leap from fight to fight. And maybe it's just too much of a leap for me right out of the gate. But I don't want 36-year-old Yakovlev either.
I completely agree. And there's actually another spot on this card a little bit later on that we're going to talk. Very, very similar position. I hate it when a guy is undiscovered and then gets discovered by the public. To me, that's a spot you never want to be on. If you caught them when they were the dog, I mean, maybe Alvarez wins this thing, but it might be Harry. So we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens. And yeah, I apologize everybody watching the video if it flickers a little bit. I ran an update on my computer last night that took about 2 straight hours, so not sure what they did on the back end, but I might need to download a new driver or something to fix this issue for next week. Second fight up on the card, we've got a women's flyweight fight. Liana Jojua returning against Miranda Maverick, who's the UFC newcomer here in this spot. Jojua 8-3, Maverick is 9-2. Liana is a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt. She's a little stiff on the feet. She's kind of a work in progress in that area. She's very, very hittable, unfortunately, and she lets herself get walked down. She walks backwards. She lets people control the center of the octagon. However, it does look like she's starting to get more comfortable on the feet. She's willing to fire back. She's extremely flexible and extremely dangerous off of her back. I think she got to the UFC a little bit too early, and that's something that she's going to have to evolve very, very quickly if she wants to compete and stay in the UFC. Miranda Maverick, on the flip side, light on her feet. She's got a karate style sort of with striking. She comes in with blitz attacks. She's got a nice push kick that she uses to maintain the range on the feet. And then she's got really solid level changes. When she's on the mat, she's a strong grappler, and she's got sneaky back takes. She's more of a wrestler than anything, in my opinion. And she's not nearly as effective when she's on her back. If she's on top, she's very dangerous. On her back, not quite the same story. I have a weird issue on this fight because it seems like it should be Miranda Maverick all day. But she's around a minus 400 favorite right now. The comeback on Jojua is plus 300, plus 315 even. I'm seeing as high as plus 330 out there in the market. I feel like this line is just too wide. And especially with Maverick wanting to go to the ground, that's Jojua's wheelhouse. That's how you give her an opportunity to pull the upset here. What are you thinking on this one, Matt?
Yeah, there's two things that worry me. Number one, for the American heading over to Fight Island, it hasn't been the greatest. The time difference hurts Americans the most. It's such a significant time difference. And don't get me wrong, some of these fighters are now, when you're in week 5 of a Fight Island and they've been there for a few weeks, some of them have had time to adjust to the different sleep patterns, trying to sleep during the day. But a lot of fighters just say they can't. Hey, I can't sleep during the day. Well, it affects me. And Americans historically over there on Fight Island haven't had the most success. And I don't like, it really worries me with these 5'3" really short fighters. And the same thing with Jessica Andrade. And I knew she got the big win, even though I took Chookagian this past Saturday. But I thought Chookagian was doing a lot of positive stuff on the feet, landing knees on the entry, using that jab outside. Obviously, Andrade landed the bigger shots, including that big body shot. But Maverick strikes me as that same type of fighter. And how many fighters have we seen look so good in other organizations that are big, Invicta, Bellator, Strikeforce, whatever it is, and they come over to the UFC and melt under the bright lights in their UFC debut. And that's what the situation here we're in with Maverick. This is still her UFC debut. All the way over there in Abu Dhabi to make it more stressful. It would only be dog or pass for me here.
I completely agree. And shout out to my boy DFS hanging out here in the chat. I think this is a dog or pass spot. I just don't know if I have the guts to actually pull the trigger on Liana Jojua. I mean, she is coming along. I think she definitely could be something in the UFC, but I don't know if she's there quite yet. The time difference, I think, with Miranda makes a huge difference. And honestly, I don't trust Miranda's IQ. In her last fight, I think she fought Pearl Gonzalez over in Invicta. We saw her dominate round 1, but then in round 2, she got taken down. She got put on her back. She gave up a couple of reversals in bad positions. I feel like this is one where if Liana doesn't get finished early, this could turn into a scrambly, hairy type of grappling match, and she can work her way back into this one and maybe even finish it. So for me, I'm going to completely agree. It's dog or pass. I've got a lean here to Jojua. If money keeps on flooding here on Miranda Maverick, I might have to take a half-unit shot on the dog or something because it's just going to get outrageous at this pace.
And sometimes, a lot of times, what I've noticed is main card favorites tend to come back down because people are looking for shots later. And in most cases, in a main card, underdog. You've heard of that dog at least. You know who they are. There's some familiarity. People are more willing to take shots with the dog. These early prelim big favorites, they tend to go up. So if you're looking to bet Jojua, I don't know that there's any rush. I think you can wait until later in the week and maybe even get a better number. Sometimes early in the week with some of these bigger favorites, you have to get that big number now because they are going to drop throughout the week. And there are going to be at least two popular dogs all week. It happens every week. There's two popular dogs. We see the line drop dramatically throughout the week on those two. I don't know that Jojua is really on anybody's radar. And I'm thinking that this one, you can go ahead and be patient and then maybe wait and still get like plus 350 or something later in the week.
I think you've nailed it, and especially with the basically the I guess I don't want to call it something that I shouldn't. People don't like women's MMA. People don't trust women's MMA. When you see a fighter that they feel is untrustworthy in women's MMA, it's even worse. So I feel like people are going to be piling on Maverick here, and the last time I saw a line where a women's fighter got steamed all the way up that high that wasn't a championship caliber contender, that didn't end so well for those laying the chalk. So we'll see how that one ends up turning out. I'm a little bit excited here. I mean, I'm sorry. Okay, first off, we got to get this out of the way. Umar Nurmagomedov, we've got to send some well wishes out. That fight got pulled off the card. Apparently, he's got like a really bad staph infection or the flu.
Fourth time, right?
Yeah. So he is not making his UFC debut. That guy just can't seem to get into the cage. It's unfortunate. I hope they find a replacement for Sergey. So we're going to go ahead and bump over that fight. The next one, this one I am excited to talk about. We've got Da Un Jung taking on Smilin' Sam Alvey at light heavyweight. And Matt, I'm going to go ahead and let you kick this one off because I'll warn you, I got a hot take here.
Yeah, and I saw that hot take earlier. And I tried to find a way to get myself on it. And here's the problem sometimes of betting MMA, and I tell people this all the time, and we tend to do it. I tend to consider myself pretty sharp in other sports, right? And in football, at least, hey, a team wins or loses, you're able to ignore it because they play next week. In daily sports, it's great. You bet a baseball team, you watch them play horrible, they play the next day, and you're over it. But with fighters, they fight. And then for months, a lot of time, your only impression is that last fight of a fighter. And I saw, Ung Jun destroy Mike Rodriguez, who then bounced back and looked really good in his next fight. So I'm like, wow, Ung Jun looked great. And then the guy he beat turned around and looked great. And I just think this guy has all the skills to beat Sam Alvey. So I went back and looked and said, well, who does Sam Alvey beat? What are the type of guys that he does beat? Old Rashad Evans, Gian Vellante, who's never blocked a punch with anything besides his nose or his jaw ever. Arsene Prachnio. He beats guys that are slow, there to be hit. Who gives him problems? Athletic guys like Ryan Spann, Jimmy Crute, Kidson Abreu. No, don't get me wrong. You could ignore the Little Nog fight, but if you remember, Alvey was actually a big favorite against Little Nog, who knocked him out. 10 of his 14 losses are by decision, so no one could question the heart or the chin of Sam Alvey. I just wonder if he has the athleticism, and for me, it comes down to volume. So I do think when you talk about betting underdogs of greater than 2-1, you also have to talk about path to victory. Because at that point, how is my guy going to win the fight? And there's still a clear path to victory for Sam Alvey here, which is him winning by knockout. But I don't think it's a two-way path here. I don't think Sam Alvey wins a decision because I think the output from Ung Jun here is going to win him rounds. So I think it's Alvey by KO. If you really like Alvey, I think you can also put Alvey by KO and get a bigger price because I don't know that he wins a decision here. I just don't think he's going to be able to out-volume Ung Jun.
I can totally understand the sentiment, but this is actually that fight I alluded to earlier where you've got a fighter who went from being a huge underdog to now being a huge favorite. Da Un Jung was a 2-1 dog against Khadis Ibragimov, who was the biggest bust of 2020. That guy had no business being in the octagon, and this guy was an underdog to him. They went life and death in that fight, and it wasn't until Cadiz quit and gave his neck up that he actually ended the fight. I think he's right on Cadiz's level, if I'm being honest. Now, Da Un Jung is young, so this is one of those spots where he could absolutely flatline Sam Alvey round one because of the improvements he's made in the offseason. You got to expect younger fighters to get better. But in cases like Cadiz, sometimes they just don't. Sometimes they just don't have it. And you said that he had the Mike Rodriguez knocked out. He looked absolutely phenomenal against Mike Rodriguez. Yes, Mike Rodriguez looked pretty good in his next fight, but what happened after that? He got his bell rung by Ed Short Fuse Herman. And with Mike Rodriguez, he's one of the chinniest fighters on the roster, in my opinion. He either knocks you out cold, because his Muay Thai is sick, don't get me wrong. The dude's a great striker, but he can't take a punch coming the other direction. Sam Alvey, on the other hand, like you mentioned, that heart, that durability, I don't know that Da Un Jung is going to actually be able to put him away. And with a guy like that kind of volume, he's there to be hit. In fact, he's got a negative strike differential. If you look at the stats, he gets hit about a significant strike more than he lands. And even though Sam Alvey has that low output, when you've got a guy that's coming in that's willing to stand in the pocket and trade with you like that, that's going to open that window. That's going to open that opportunity. And then I went back and I looked at Da Un Jung's record. So far in the UFC, he's only beaten two of the guys that are on my bottom tier could get cut any day list from the UFC. The fights before the UFC, their records were 7-3, 4-1, 0-5, 8-5, 0-1. He's fought absolutely nobody. So he's got a good-looking record. He's knocked a bunch of people out, but he's fought nobody worth talking about. And Sam Alvey, on the other hand, you mentioned the Ryan Spann fight. Now, Spann is an athletic guy who's fast. He punches hard. I thought he was coming along really, really well. And Sam Alvey damn near put him down in the third round. Sam Alvey took everything that kid had to offer. You can't take this guy down. He's got good balance, strong hips. If he gets taken down, you cannot keep him there. This is going to be a striking affair. And Da Un Jung is honestly, like I said, unless he made some off-season improvements, if he stands right in front of Sam Alvey, this is another spot where I feel like he is giving the guy the path to victory that he needs. And Sam Alvey recently did an interview where he talked about how he can't leave it to the judges anymore. He understands finally that his style does not play well with the judges, and he himself predicted a round 2 knockout. And that's enough for me. I'm rolling the dice. I locked the bet in early. I got Sam Alvey as a plus 310 underdog. And it looks like I might be, I don't want to call myself sharp, but I beat the line move here because right after I got on it, it looks like some money has come in on Alvey. He's only down to about plus 275, so I think there's still plenty of value there if you're looking for the puncher's chance. If you're going with me, he's still a nice, juicy, fat dog. But this is a spot where I'm not sold on Da Un Jung. He's got to prove it to me, and Sam Alvey may be a gatekeeper, but I feel like this is a step down for Sam Alvey. So I'll take the shot on Sam to turn the young kid back one, give him his first UFCL, teach this kid a lesson. And I might even sprinkle that round 2 knockout prop just to see if Sam Alvey makes good on his word.
I like where your head's at in this fight, and I'll tell you something I started doing since May that's actually made me more money than anything else I've been doing betting MMA, which is betting MMA in play. Now, not every book offers all the cards in play, but all the big ones definitely offer the pay-per-view cards in play. And this is one of those spots, and I like where you really got me thinking with your analysis, assuming Sam Alvey makes it out of round 1, because we know that Da Un Jung's going to come out in round 1 firing. He's a big puncher. He's a young guy. They tend to come out aggressive. And assuming that Sam Alvey makes it out of that round. And again, 10 of his 14 losses are by decision. He's not an easy guy to finish, Sam Alvey, and he certainly fought a lot bigger and stronger than Da Un Jung and gone the distance with those guys. Assuming he gets out of round 1, he's probably going to be a significant dog because chances are he's probably going to lose round 1. You know, he's going to get out volumed by the younger guy. The younger guy may even land some big shots in round 1. And now that plus 275 might go to like plus 500, plus 600, plus 700 in play between round 1 and round 2. But I think you're right that if he gets through round 1, who's likely to fatigue? The younger guy. And if you try to wrestle with Sam Alvey, he's so heavy on his hips. And it is so, you expend so much energy. Just ask Ryan Spann how much energy he expanded trying to get Alvey down and hold him there, that I could certainly see exhaustion be an issue. And then Alvey, who somehow just never seems to get tired, he's just slow, period, start landing that big left hand like he did against Ryan Spann late. I'll tell you this, and I'll make it a bet now. No matter what condition he's in between rounds, if Sam Alvey walks to his corner after round one, I'm going to bet him in play in the fight.
There you go. I like that. That's a good move. If he gets out of round one, Sam Alvey is the bet. And
he has to walk to his corner.
He's got on his own accord. He can't be like crawling.
Yeah.
I like it. All right. So that's my first official bet of the night. I've already got it locked and loaded. I'm ready to go. Sam Alvey is my big barking dog for the weekend. Next fight up, we've got a welterweight tilt here. Alex Cowboy Oliveira making his glorious return against Shavkat Rahkmonov, who is a UFC debutant. We've got Oliveira, 22-8-1, tons of experience at this point, a UFC mainstay, almost as popular as the other Cowboy, and Shavkat making his UFC debut, shiny 12-0 undefeated record. Matt, I'm going to kick it to you. How do you see this one playing out?
Look, I never bet on guys making their UFC debuts, almost never, but I feel like this guy is a star in the making. We talked about how Dong Jun has never fought anyone but tomato cans on the regional circuit. Go back and look at the record of who this guy's fought, Rahkmonov, on the M1 scene. I mean, M1 Global is a pretty good organization, and he wasn't fighting the most elite guys in the world, but most of them are guys that are 22-5, 26-7, tough guys. Fighting in main events in M1 is no joke, and this guy is a machine, 6'1", 170, as chiseled as it gets, a finishing machine, all 12 wins by finish. And Cowboy Oliveira is a guy who, even though his last couple fights, he seems to be having a more tempered approach to it. He's a guy that overall is a finish you or get finished kind of fighter historically in Cowboy Oliveira. And I think he's going to go in there, the shorter guy, the less reach advantage, against a guy that I think just hasn't been discovered yet. People don't know who they are, who he is yet. There's a flood of fighters coming in from Eastern Europe, and sometimes the general public doesn't know who all of them are. And in this case, we have a fighter from Kazakhstan, but he is an absolute wrecking machine, fighting in a very reputable organization in M1 Global against decent guys here. I went ahead this one and already locked in a play at plus 145 on Rahkmonov here.
All right. I like it, and that's a good line. I was actually, I was going to tell you to talk me off the edge, Matt. I was going to ask you if you could give me a reason not to bet Shavkat, because this is a dog that I see tons of value in. And Alex Oliveira, I feel like he might be a wrongful favorite here. I know you can't, it's hard to make a UFC debuting fighter a favorite over a guy with this much experience, but Alex Oliveira, we saw his 2.0 version his last time out. He's on a 2-fight winning streak for the first time in forever. He seems to be taking this whole thing a little bit more seriously now, but I just think he's limited. He's athletic, he's fast, he's incredibly strong. His technique is finally starting to get there. He's hard to take down, but I think everything that he does, Shavkat already does better. And this is not a like you mentioned, he's coming from a good organization outside the UFC. This is not a kid that's just walked through everybody. He's been chin-checked. If you go back and you watch his fight in 2018 against Renat, I believe is the guy who he fought, he got almost knocked stiff on his feet. I mean, he did the whole sack of potatoes fall over thing, managed to stay calm, recovered, came out in round 3 and put that dude away. I mean, this is a tough kid, and he's going to have a height and reach advantage here unless he gets just mauled by Alex on the mat, which we haven't seen Cowboy go to his grappling in some time. I think Shavkat can just kind of stay at range and outstrike him. And even if it does hit the floor, we've seen Oliveira submitted before. And this kid is not, he's a 100% finisher. He's got more submissions on his record, I think, than he has knockouts. So I don't know. I'm very, very tempted to bet the dog here. I haven't put the bet in, and it looks like money's already coming on him, so that line is drying up. If you want to get the dog money on Shavkat, you better get it sooner than later.
I agree. And I think Cowboy Oliveira, it's a little bit of name familiarity here. So this is a guy who's been in there with Cowboy Cerrone, Gilbert Burns, Platinum Mike Perry. He's just been in there with everybody at 170, right? So all of a sudden people get used to, oh, I know who Cowboy Oliveira is, and he's on a 2-fight winning streak. But how impressive is that 2-fight winning streak? He had to step way back in class, split decision win over Max Griffin, and then finally he looked good in one performance against Peter Sabata. Again, another guy kind of on the fringe. I think we could be seeing a superstar in the making at 170, a guy who may just get right past the gatekeeper in Oliveira and keep on going and challenge people in that top 5. I think this is one of those situations where people just haven't discovered him publicly yet, and they're in for a real treat because this young man can fire.
Okay. That's enough for me, Matt. Once we get it, I can't do it right now, but as soon as we get off the show, I'll be looking to see what line I can get, and I'll be joining you on Shavkat. All right. We have currently 435 live viewers. I want to say welcome to everyone that has joined. Thank you so much for hanging out with us here today. This is odds.com. I'm Clint, host of the Die Hard MMA podcast. We are joined by Matt Holt, and he is the president of U.S. Integrity, one of my absolute favorite guests to have on the show. Do me a favor, hit that like button if you haven't already. Jump out there, share the show, get the word out. And again, I have to apologize for the choppiness of my video. My computer ran an update, not sure what happened, so the quality's usually a little better than this. I apologize. Our next fight up that we've got to talk about is a battle between rising stars. We've got Nathaniel Wood taking on Kenney, man. Nathaniel Wood, 17-4. Kenney, 15-2-1. Two guys that are both bet-on fighters for me going head-to-head here. Nathaniel Wood fights long. He's got a good check hook, a big right hand. He's got a nice kind of jabbing front kick. He almost uses that teep push kick as a jab. He's got strong hips. And then when the fight does go to the ground, it's usually on his terms. He's hard to take down, but he's got a 6 submission game on him once he gets it there. Kenney, on the other hand, he's doing the quick turnaround thing. It's his second fight, I think, in a month. Heavy leg kicks. The last time out, we saw him absolutely destroy poor Alatang. No idea how that guy made it to the judges' scorecards with the way Kenney's kicks were working on his body. Good head movement from Kenney. He's a wrestler first, a scramble master type of fighter, sick jiu-jitsu, but his striking has obviously caught up to his ground game, and his new kicking attacks, I think, are on point. I think they're ready to go. I'm a little bit biased here. I love my man Kenney, and I'm tempted to play him here. However, how often do you get Nathaniel Wood as a dog? He's sitting about plus 160 right now, and Kenney's a minus 185 favorite. I gotta wonder if the line isn't a little bit wide, even though I feel like Kenney's the right side here, Matt. What do you feel?
I thought it was a little bit wide as well, and I thought one of the interesting sort of, ironic twist to this fight is, I think that in this matchup, Kenney is the better wrestler. I think his wrestling is unbelievable. But what's funny about that is his only loss in the UFC is both of these guys are 4-1, is to a wrestler in Miranda. And on the other side, I think Wood is the better striker, but his only loss in the UFC is by knockout. So both of these guys, we think of their strengths. One is striking, but the striker got knocked out. And on the other side, one of them is a wrestler who lost to a wrestler. And, at the wrestling game in this. So I think it's real interesting. You're right. In Kenney's last fight, he did nothing but show off that new striking game. But I still think at the end of the day, this one is going to go one of two ways. If they stay on their feet and Kenney falls in love with his new striking game, and don't get me wrong, there's nothing wrong with his new striking game. I really think Kenney is evolving as a true legitimate contender at 135. But I also think if it's a pure striking match, that length of Wood, the crispness and the technical striking is going to take over a little bit. I think Kenney's best route to win this is to constantly get takedowns. Even if Wood keeps getting back up, if Kenney could continue to get takedowns, land some ground and pound, he's going to win a decision in this fight. And I think he could do it pretty easily. I don't think he's going to sub Nathaniel Wood, who's really slick off his back, has those long limbs, causes them all kind of problems. I don't even think he should go for submissions. I just think he should try to get takedowns, land some ground and pound, get some ground control, and win this thing on points. I'm with you. I feel like if this line was 165, which isn't that far from where it is, I might lay Casey Kenney. But at 190, it's a complete pass for me. But I also will say if it gets to 220, I might be on Nathaniel Wood. It's that close in variance in terms of where this fight is.
I completely understand that, and I feel you. For everybody listening, we are talking sports betting. The number matters a whole heck of a lot in this sport. It's the most variance affected sport, in my opinion, on the planet. And if you're getting a fighter who's extremely talented and live like Nathaniel Wood around that plus 190, plus 200 range, that's a hell of a live dog, in my opinion. So I'm right there with you. I'm kind of hoping the money continues to come in on Wood so I can make a play on Casey Kenney. I do think he gets it done, and I think you're right. I think the ground control time will factor. I think that's something that's a solid path to victory for him there. And I don't know, those body kicks. I think he can get to him with those body kicks. I kind of envision this one going to decision, though. I don't think anybody's getting finished. What do you think about that?
I don't think so either. And I don't want to call that knockout loss to John Dodson fluky. Because I know some people are saying, well, the ref stopped it early, or he might have jumped in a little early there and Wood was still there. Dodson rocked Nathaniel Wood, and it was legit. And, whether it was an earlier stoppage or not, Dodson did rock him and then deserved to get that knockout victory in that fight, I thought. But at the end of the day, I think Wood isn't a pure power striker. I think his length and just snappy technical striking has caused people some problems on the regional scene. But I think here on the big stage against somebody as good as Casey Kenney, I think if they stay standing, he'll be able to outwork him just by a little bit because Casey Kenney's striking is really good. Whereas if Casey Kenney can start getting this to the ground, same thing. He'll be able to outwork him a little bit, top control, ground and pound. I agree. I do think it's going the distance. And I favor, in a pick'em, obviously, I favor Casey Kenney, but the odds are always the great equalizer. And I think the odds are just about right. I think what's that perfect line right in this fight where you would never even want either side because you couldn't imagine value? It'd be Casey Kenney minus 180, and we're pretty close to that.
I feel you. I completely agree. And as much as it hurts, this one might be the perfect fireball and popcorn fight on the card here. Get a drink, get a snack, just sit back and enjoy the MMA. This is going to be a hell of a fight. Neither of these guys can really afford to take that step back, so there's a lot on the line here, and it should be a hell of a fight.
Yeah, and the winner's going to get a big fight.
Oh, yeah. The winner of this one gets propelled into legitimate contender status, for sure. The next fight up, we've got a heavyweight tilt between Stefan Struve. The skyscraper makes his return here, 33-12 against Tai Tuivasa, the shoey master, who is 10-3. This is the bum fight of the night, Matt. We've got two guys that are struggling in the UFC, two guys that can't quite seem to put it together. And you know what? It's funny because I think there is a clear side here. One of my early bets that I put action on is Tai Tuivasa. I got him at plus 110. The line opened at plus 135. I'm a little bummed I missed that spot. He's sitting about minus 105 now, so once again, all we can do in sports betting is beat the line move and hold our nose and hope we're right. So we did that, but I don't like Stefan Struve. Fading Stefan Struve is one of my absolute favorite things to do in MMA sports betting. The dude is shot. He's like 33 years old, and he's got no chin anymore. Even though he's got this ridiculous height and reach advantage, he still just doesn't know how to use it. He's completely open to that overhand right. His legs are there to be kicked. Yes, if he gets the fight on the floor, he's got a sick Brazilian jiu-jitsu game, and he can choke people out. However, Tai Tuivasa is hard to take down, and he learned his lesson going to the mat with anybody recently. I know a lot of people are going to, kind of scratch their heads when I say he's hard to take down and look at his last fight against Sergey Spivak and be like, Clint, he got taken down a bunch. Well, the fact of the matter is he got his leg kicks caught by an athletic and young Sergey Spivak, who also has some of the best hip throws in the MMA heavyweight division. Those aren't available to a guy like Stefan Struve. You can't get your hips under Tai Tuivasa if you're Stefan Struve, and if he's kicking your low calf, you're going to have a hard time getting those lanky arms all the way down there to catch a kick and pick them up. So I think that this is a tailor-made fight for Tai Tuivasa, and I think of the two of them, he's the guy that's still got a little more gas in the tank. He's only 27 years old. He took a year off. We talked a little bit earlier about fighters who take that time to develop when they're young, when they're improving, when they've got that window. I think I think he's going to show us a 2.0 version in this fight, and I think Stefan Struve is probably going to go to sleep again.
You know what's funny is I actually bet Tai Tuivasa myself already because I think it's going to flip favorites before fight night. And I'm also inclined to bet this fight over because I think one of two things happen. Either Struve catches an overly aggressive Tuivasa coming in and gets him in some type of submission early, or Tuivasa gets the knockout here. And the other thing I like about Tuivasa, who's coming off 3 straight losses now, is that I'm with you. I think he's going to make the adjustments. I think he knows his UFC career is on the line here. Not a lot of guys survive 4 straight losses in the UFC without getting cut. So he knows he has to go out there and put on a big performance. And those losses were against Junior Dos Santos, some really tough guys, Blagoy Ivanov, the fight before. On the other side of it, Stefan Struve is 1-4 in his last 5 fights. And the only win is over an inflated Marcos Rogerio de Lima, who isn't even really a heavyweight. He just stopped training, I think, and his weight ballooned up, and Struve was able to beat him. Other than that, Ben Rothwell, Marcin Tybura, an old Andrei Arlovsky, Alexander Volkov. Struve just got blasted by all of them. Didn't even look competitive in most of those fights. I'm with you. I think that Tai Tuivasa is going to come in and get him out of there quick. So I already played Tai Tuivasa, but now that the totals are starting to come out, I noticed that it was 1.5 over -18. If it gets to 1.5 over -20 something, and I can actually get plus money on the under, I'm probably going to take the under 1.5 rounds as well. Because again, I think Tuivasa gets it done quick, and I think the only chance at a submission is if Stefan Struve catches him early, because I can't imagine the skyscraper hanging around too long otherwise. So I'm already on Tuivasa, and if we only need about 5 more cents on the over, if it does get there and I can get plus money on under 1.5, I'm going to ride that train as well.
I like it. I'm glad to hear that you and I are on the same page. It always feels good when we agree on these fight breakdowns. And then I like that look on the under as well. I think that's absolutely something in play here because I think Tai Tuivasa is coming out for blood. And Stefan Struve, the one thing he is not, is durable. So I'm very much thinking that you're accurate. I think Tai Tuivasa wins this thing by knockout. And so for everybody watching, I've been playing with my settings here during the stream, and I've figured out that I seem to have less issues when the chat is not up. My screen seems to be blinking a lot, so I apologize. For the rest of the show, I'm not going to be as interactive with the chat because when I tab over to that, it seems like the screen flickers a little bit more often. So I know it's a big fight week. I apologize. That's rough. I hate that I'm having technical issues. Buying a new laptop is on the very top of my list. So moving on, we've got a fight that, believe it or not, Matt, you and I have talked about before. We've got Magomed Ankalaev taking on Ion Cutelaba. Can you believe it? We're back in the same spot we were, a month ago?
You know what's interesting about this fight, and this is what I don't understand, and I almost never lay big favorites. If I'm laying a big favorite, I really have to feel very confident about it. Is a month ago when these guys were supposed to fight, and by the way, this is the 3rd time this fight has been rebooked, is the fact that this line went from -370, rebooked with nothing in between, to -320, rebooked to nothing in between, to -270 or 280. Well, what the heck happened in between? Ankalaev is the same fighter he always was. He's going to beat Ion Cutelaba unless somehow the Hulk lands one of those big shots. He cannot handle the technical striking, the overall game here. And I think Cutelaba, and maybe people just looked into him a little more. Some of the guys he's fought is really impressive. Jared Cannonier and Glover Teixeira, and he has all these big names on his resume, but he lost to all of them. And the guys he's beat are all guys that are there to be hit, slower guys. I mean, the 4 guys he beat in the UFC, and here's a really interesting stat. The 4 guys that Ion Cutelaba has beaten in the UFC are 4-8 since they fought Cutelaba. So that basically none of those wins have gone on and aged well. I think Ankalaev gets it done here. Obviously, the first fight was controversial, but Cutelaba kind of made it controversial by doing the whole bobbing and weaving, faking he was hurt thing, trying to play possum. He kind of had a cause and effect. If you fake like you're hurt, sometimes the ref's going to think you're hurt and stop the fight. And I just think at the end of the day, the technical striking difference here is going to show up. The reach, the length, the way they fight. God forbid it goes to the ground. That's going to be one-sided. Look, I was hesitant to lay 370, but I'm amazed with nothing happening in between that this line is dropped down to like 270, and now I'm suddenly very interested in the favorite.
Yeah, and it's funny because I'm more of a dog hunter. You know the way I like to play it. And I called this as a pass fight because I see exactly what you're seeing, and I've got an unhealthy attachment to Ion Cutelaba. I'm a huge fan of this guy. I love what he does, and I ended up pulling the trigger on him when he got up around that plus 300 range. It was just too much for me. These are light heavyweights. This guy does nothing but sling big leather. At 3-1, you got to roll those dice that he's going to maybe be able to clip the more technical guy. But like you said, this line has been ping-ponging around and moving every single time they reassess this fight. I don't understand where this move came from or why it happened. And now Ion Cutelaba is unplayable for me at this line. I'm going to need more than that. So I got a bit of a hot take for you, Matt. I think what happened is, I don't know if you saw the Tennessee Titans, but after 2 weeks off and having COVID, they came out looking like they had superpowers. I don't think Ion Cutelaba caught COVID. I think COVID caught Ion Cutelaba. He's going to come out twice the man he was after his layoff and just absolutely murk Ankalaev.
Maybe.
All joking aside, I'm with you. Ankalaev is a much more technical striker, and I love the Hulk. I love what he does. I love the whole persona. I hope he goes green for the weigh-ins. But I can't get there with a bet. This one's a pass for me.
Yeah, look, last time we broke this down, it was a pass for me. But suddenly, Ankalaev has become playable only because the odds are so low. I'm like, gosh, this guy was almost 4-1 when they rebooked the rematch after the controversial stoppage. And now we're down to 280 and dropping. At some point, the value's just there. And I'm with you. I never bet favorites. Like anything over 200, I'm just like, I got to find a way to reduce that risk mitigation or pass, or because I don't really like parlaying fights, because then again, you're adding things that have to get accomplished to it, and the odds are never, true to outcome. But in this case, I am just going to bet Ankalaev because I feel like the value's gotten there.
And if memory serves correctly, you had to play on the total last time out, didn't you? Are you looking to go back to that as well?
I don't know that I need it to go under as much. So the last time, that's what I played, was the under. And literally felt really good about it, and nothing's changed. So again, why don't I feel good about the under? Well, now I have the favorite bet. And if Cutelaba is going to win this fight at all, it's probably by first-round knockout. So I think that has a chance of losing both. Or a late knockout. I mean, he's always in it, right? Just because the fact that he's still in there throwing bombs, it could go over, and my guy gets knocked out. So at the end of the day, I think I'm just going to stay away. And I think Cutelaba is pretty tough, and he showed that he's pretty game. The Cannonier fight, they exchanged back and forth, and he was able. I mean, granted, Cannonier was a smaller light heavyweight. He's a big middleweight. But he's bigger than Cutelaba, and they stood and traded, and Cutelaba ate those shots. And he's super dangerous. I mean, granted, we all know the path to victory for Cutelaba. He almost got Glover out of there. He had Glover in bad shape, and then the tide got turned. But at the end of the day, he just doesn't tend to get it done in these fights. And the guys that he has beaten in the UFC, not very impressive since. It's one of those resumes, step up and lose, step down and win. This is a step up for Cutelaba. He just hasn't got it done in these spots in the past.
That's a totally valid way of looking at it, and you're right. I own Cutelaba. He went the way of Ryan Bader, where he got a little overzealous when he had Glover rocked, and I can't wait to get Glover back. We'll be talking about a fight of his coming up pretty soon here, because he's basically my favorite old dog in the UFC today. So he's got that veteran savvy like nobody else.
Yeah, Glover's awesome.
So we're getting up there on these fights. We've got 490 live viewers hanging out with us. Thank you all so much for spending your evening here talking UFC 254 with us. We appreciate you being here. This is odds.com. Do me a favor, smash the like button there on the show. We've got my guest, Matt Holt, the president of U.S. Integrity, cutting some time out to spend with us this evening. So I appreciate you all being here, and I'd love to get over that 500 cap. That's my personal record, is hitting 500, so it'd be fun to break that right here live on the show. I do have to give a quick shout out to the boys over at GOATCapitalSports.com. They're my other sponsor, and we do a lot of content here at Odds HQ. If you're looking for breakdowns and free picks, that's what we do. If you're looking to just have someone basically tell you where to put your money. They've got very reasonable membership packages. Let them know Clint sent you. Go check out the boys at GOATCapitalSports.com. They've been crushing all the other sports that have been going on right now, and all I can tell you about is MMA. So, next fight coming up here, we've got another UFC newcomer. Lauren Murphy, 13-4, had Cynthia Calvillo unfortunately pull from the fight, which I'm very sad about. That was a great fight. And instead, we have Lilia Sharikov, who is 8-1, making her UFC debut. Now, Matt, I got to tell you, I was going to hammer Lauren Murphy. She was plus 180 against Cynthia Calvillo, and I was loving that dog spot. I hope they rebook that fight, because I think Lauren Murphy is live as hell against Cynthia Calvillo with that takedown defense and how heavy she is on her legs and her hips and forcing people to stand with her, and then she drops bombs. Lauren Murphy is basically the female Chuck Liddell, in my opinion. She uses that wrestling in reverse, and then she just puts a beating on people. Lilia, on the other hand, though, she's 8-1, and at first, it's hard to find footage on her. I saw a little bit of her work, and I wasn't a huge fan of what I saw. And then I found another fight or two, her more recent ones, and she's not half bad. She is solid on the feet. She is willing to stand in the pocket and trade. She's got big clinch knees. She's got a big left hand. She can hit hard, and she works behind a very intelligent jab. She's also got good timing on her blast double leg takedowns and nasty ground and pound if she gets on top of you. I'm pretty impressed with what I see from her. I think Lauren Murphy's a tall order in her UFC debut, but this girl's not half bad.
Yeah, I think I'm going to pass on this fight, but there could be an interesting angle to play it. So we have somebody coming in late, a late replacement, who the limited amount of footage I got to see on her, although I heard she's good on the ground, I didn't really get to see too much ground, because I saw her striking a little bit, and it looked like she's going to stand in the pocket, but she's going to give up 3 inches of height, and she's going to have massive reach and height disadvantages against a girl who can really bang here. And it's a last-second replacement, and we know sometimes with those last-second replacements, making your UFC debut, everything that goes into it, these people tend to have energy dumps. And we know in women's MMA and fights like this total is probably going to be 2.5 over minus 300. Literally that high, 250. It's going to be a big, huge, giant minus on the over. Well, what's the best chance for Murphy to get it done is maybe these two, maybe the newcomer has a really good first round, but that height, reach, and power disadvantage is going to come into play. And I'm wondering if early on it doesn't look somewhat competitive, but as the person taking the fight and having to do that weight cut last minute tends to fatigue into round 2 and 3, if Murphy doesn't pour it on her and get a stoppage, maybe if it's 2.5 under, like plus 200 or plus 220, it's worth a quarter to a third of a unit flyer.
I like the way you think. This is a very, very rare spot where you've got two women who are finishers, and they match up extremely well. I think you're onto something, that the under might be a sneaky value spot here. And honestly, to me, that's maybe the only play on the board. The only other thing I would look at is maybe even playing the round props on Lauren Murphy. We've seen her knock girls out in the third round before. And
Like
getting
that.
Lauren Murphy in round 2 and Lauren Murphy in round 3, those are going to be gigantic plus lines because the books always think the women's fight are going the distance. And from what I've seen from this Lilia, she's going to be game in round 1. I don't expect her to fall over easy. But like you said, that last minute weight cut, that last minute travel, that might start to wear on her. And Murphy's round 3, that might be worth a little sprinkle.
And I'm wondering if she's not, you know how it is on the regional scene. These guys don't have the same data scientists and, dietitians professionally showing them how to cut weight. It seems to me like maybe she should be fighting a weight class lower at her height and reach and body frame. It seems like, look, if you have the money and you're one of these, this is the difference between becoming a super elite professional fighter and a guy like Joaquin Buckley who works at Walgreens still, despite getting the 50K off that huge knockout, is the ability to take that money then and take the next step in your evolution and hire these dietitians and all these health and people to get you to be able to cut weight the right way and really shape your body the right way. And it feels to me like these two might be fighting a weight class apart. And I wouldn't be surprised if they stand there and bang. While it may start off competitive, it may get ugly late.
I completely agree. And the other thing to think about, I know the level of competition is already staggeringly different with the one coming from outside the UFC to the inside of the UFC. But Lauren Murphy was not training for a cupcake. She was training for Cynthia freaking Calvillo, who's basically been penciled in as the next big thing in whatever division she's training in. So she was ready to go for a damn near number 1 contender type of fight. This is not just any short notice replacement. This is a massive jump up in competition level with being the smaller fighter, with being on short notice. I think that Lauren Murphy could almost command as a parlay piece, in my opinion, in this spot.
Yeah, I agree. I don't see her losing this fight. And I think as it goes on and gets out of the first, it's more and more likely that she may also win by stoppage. I think you're going to see a young lady who looks and probably is really in terms of fighting a weight division above. And boy, can she bang. So I know she's 37 years old. And maybe, it's now or never for the peak of the mountain. But boy, can she bang.
Absolutely. She's a dark horse in that division, in my opinion. Next fight up, we've got a middleweight fight between Jacob Malhoun. Malhoun? I'm not sure I'm pronouncing that correctly. And Phil Hawes, who is 8-2. Jacob is 4-0 undefeated, making his UFC debut. I looked into this guy because there's not a lot to know about him, and he's a 3-0 boxer. He's got a very intelligent jab, good range control, nice head movement. He works the leg kicks. He's very, very slow and measured. And the big thing you need to know is he's Whittaker's boy. He's a training partner of Robert Whittaker, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu purple belt, and this is a spot where he's just getting on the card with his buddy, his training partner, the guy he's been in camp with this entire time. You may recognize Phil Hawes. He's a 2-time Dana White Tuesday Night Contender Series fighter. He trains with Cowboy, not the Cowboy on this card, the other Cowboy, and Cerrone, and he's just got huge, huge power. This guy is one of those brick shithouse Adonis type of fighters where you wonder how they can possibly pack that amount of muscle onto a human being. He's got strong body lock takedowns, a heavy top game, nasty, nasty ground and pound. The only thing, my issue really with Hawes is that his gas tank is completely suspect. If he doesn't kill you in that first round, sometimes he's got nothing left for round 2. I don't know if that's enough to put me on the dog here with Jacob, though. Talk to me, Matt. What are you looking on this one?
Look, you just said everything I know about Volkman is that he was the training partner of Robert Whittaker. Other than that, and this is hard for, all of us that watch these fights so intently, rarely do we find a guy that you've never heard of or never seen. I've never seen this guy. I literally have no idea anything about him other than he trains with Robert Whittaker over there in Australia. And on the other side, we have a guy in Phil Hawes who, if you remember right, this guy was supposed to be a big-time prospect. Because of the way his body looks and his athleticism, people said, man, this guy, he's a little raw, but he might do some amazing stuff in the UFC. And we saw, again, the UFC debut, although it's Dana White Contender Series, I think it was 3 years ago, right? It was like 2017 when he fought. I think he fought in that inaugural season of Dana White Contender Series, and he looked pretty good against Julian Marquez. Faded, the gas tank kind of gave out on him, and then Marquez hit him with that big head kick. And it was one of like the highlights of that season, that Julian Marquez head kick knockout of Phil Hawes, who, by the way, was favored in that fight, had to work his way back, get several wins, had a really impressive performance of his own on Dana White Contender Series, 5 weeks ago now? Maybe 6 weeks ago? It was in September. And now here he is, finally in his first true UFC, not Dana White Contender Series fight. He's taller, he's longer. I mean, his gas tank may run out, but we know he has the athleticism advantage. He's probably going to be faster, at least earlier. I just can't jump on the dog here, mostly because I don't know anything about him. I like Phil Hawes. He seems like a great guy. Everyone likes training with him. He looks like a career athlete, someone who is at least trained to be in athletics his whole life. I think his ceiling's a little bit low. I don't think he's ever going to contend for titles or anything because his all-around game is still a little bit limited. But I don't know how Phil Hawes loses this fight.
I couldn't agree with you more, and I just can't trust this kid. There's nothing out there to put me on this guy, and you literally would have to be throwing a dart saying, well, he trains with Robert Whittaker, and we know Whittaker is a beast, but he's got to be near that level to be able to hang with him on a daily basis. That's not good enough for me to throw a plus 220 dart. But I can't trust Phil Hawes with my money because of that damn gas tank. If this guy is a cardio machine, he could finish this thing late when Phil Hawes gasses out after having an amazing start. This is a complete pass for me because both guys are untrustworthy, and I have no clue how this fight is going to play out.
I'm with you. I can't trust. I like Phil Hawes in the underdog role, not so much as a big giant favorite, because we all remember he was a big giant favorite over Julian Marquez and got knocked the bleep out with that late head kick when he lost his focus and his gas tank run out. But I literally don't know anything about the opponent, and thus really at that point you're just taking a flyer on what you might think you know. I'm sure there might be some people that know better than I about Jacob here, but I don't, so I'm passing with you.
Yeah, you probably got to be living in Australia or New Zealand if you know anything about Jacob.
What a rarity for a guy of his caliber who's fought such limited competition and only 4 pro fights to be on the biggest pay-per-view card of the year. Really surprising move by Dana White here. And it shows you that Robert Whittaker might have just called in that big favor.
There's 2 angles where that makes sense to me. Either they want to make Phil Hawes look good. He's the Dana White Tuesday Night Contender Series guy. They're setting him up with a layup coming into the UFC, and they get Rob off their back trying to get his boy in the cage. Or somebody knows something. And even at 4-0, this kid is legit. Those are the only 2 ways that it makes sense to me, and I have no idea which one it is. So I can't wait to find out. This is a big spectator spot for me. Like I said, it's definitely a pass, but I will be watching very intently because I'm curious which way it's going to go.
I'm with you.
We've got a heavyweight fight coming up next, one that I cannot wait for. Alexander Volkov taking on Walt, the big ticket Harris. Matt, I will kick it over to you for you to start this one off for us.
Man, I took a shot with Volkov against Curtis Blades, hoping that maybe he could stem off some of the takedowns. And late, look, Blades was gassed, and I thought that Blades would gas, but I thought it would happen in like round 3, and that Volkov could rally late and either win rounds 3, 4, and 5 or knock out Blades. And he certainly had Blades on rubber legs, but it was round 5 by then, and it was a little too late, as he clearly lost the first 4 rounds. I've tried. Here's the problem is that I've had trouble before betting Volkov. So I bet him against Blades and lost. I bet him against Derek Lewis in a fight he was dominating. And then he got knocked out right at the very end and I lost. And I just don't seem to have a lot of luck betting on Alexander Volkov, who I think is an amazing guy. What a jab he has at his height. At 6'10", that long jab. And it's not just a regular jab. It is a stiff, accurate, kind of knock you down kind of jab. And I love the fact of how tough he is. His wrestling and takedown defense isn't that great, but he always struggles to get back up. He barely gets submitted for a guy who seems like he would get submitted on the ground, but he almost never does. And when you stand and trade with him, his kicks are awesome. He lacks that one giant power punch for a guy with a power punch and that, with a KO record like he has. a lot of times it's the kick or the jab setting it up, that bone rattling jab. I don't know what to expect from Walt Harris here. Look, Walt Harris, he gets KO'd a lot. This is a guy who I think, what was it, six or four of his losses come by KO. He got knocked out by Overeem in his last fight. He has some amazing athleticism, and he has a great story. So you want to rally behind Walt Harris. His daughter got kidnapped and murdered, and you want to root for him because everything about him seems like a great guy, a good dad who really wanted his to find out what happened to his stepdaughter, who's been through a lot. He almost got it done against Alistair Overeem. But one thing we know about Walt Harris is his gas tank empties. And it did in the Overeem fight. When he didn't get that knockout in the first 2 minutes, he was out of gas already. And by round 2, that fight was over. I mean, that fight was over before they started round 2. So I don't know how to trust Walt Harris here, but for whatever reason, I have some hesitation about betting Alexander Volkov. And I don't know. Sometimes you get into fights that during the week, it seems like a spot where, man, why wouldn't I be on Alexander Volkov again? A lot of advantages for here in this fight. And yet, for whatever reason, I haven't been able to pull the trigger. And I'm kind of hoping that the story behind Walt Harris, and I don't want to take advantage of the fact that he went through a tragedy, but that story tends to lead people to want to bet on him. We saw it in the fight against Overeem, where a lot of action, I'd say about 70% of the money at books came in on Walt Harris. If we see even 58% come in on Harris again and drive that number down, maybe I'll be more interested in Volkov if it gets down to like 140, 135.
All right. You know what? It's funny with the history here because you and I are polar opposites in this spot. I have faded Alexander Volkov. I bet on Blades. I bet on Derek Lewis. And I was the beneficiary of that last second Hail Mary bomb that landed. So I've been on the exact flip side of this one. And you couldn't have chopped up Walt Harris any better. The fact of the matter is, as much as we like the guy, as much as he's a great personality, and like you said, the tragedy, it's a horrible thing that happened to him. I said this in the last fight out because I bet Alistair Overeem that night. Fairy tales don't exist in MMA. And just because we love the guy doesn't mean he's going to win fights. His record is awful, and he gets knocked out on a regular basis. He's a big athletic dude, and if he doesn't put you away in round 1, he doesn't have much left for round 2 and beyond. This is a tailor-made opponent, in my opinion, for Alexander Volkov. And right before the show kicked off, Matt, I went 2 units deep on Alexander Volkov. I'm actually going to lay the, I think I got minus 167, so I'm going to lay the 3.34 units to win 2 units here on Alexander Volkov. He's got the height advantage, the reach advantage, much more technical striking. His Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu game is highly underrated. His wrestling is underrated. We saw that last time out when he started taking down Curtis Blades. He's obviously going to have a gas tank advantage. He's got good head movement. Believe it or not, the Black Beast has next-level power. He's not Francis Ngannou, but if there's one step below it, that's where the Black Beast is. He doesn't have a bad chin. Getting knocked out by Derek Lewis is not a black mark on your record, in my opinion. I think Walt Harris comes out, and this is one of those spots where he seems to have shifted gears a little bit. He got like a new personal trainer. He said it's the best he's ever felt. He's in good shape. I think he's going to try and take this fight a little bit slower. I think he's going to try and slow down a bit, not be quite so, the first 2 minutes of the fight type of blitzing attacks. And I think it's going to bite him in the ass. We saw Ankalaev try and pull that off in his last fight where he went, okay, you know what? I go hard the first 2 minutes, and it's live or die in that first 2 minutes. And it just doesn't work when those guys try to flip the script and go the other way. Walt Harris is nowhere near as technical as Volkov is, and if he slows down, I think that's just going to drain his gas tank that much further, and I honestly think it's going to damage his win condition. I like Volkov here. I like Volkov inside the distance here, and I wouldn't be surprised if he actually ends up choking Walt Harris out. I think he's going to put that ground game to work. We just saw it against Curtis Blades, and if he doesn't light up Harris early, I think in round 2 or round 3 he may mix in the takedowns when the big dude's a little bit tired and might find his way around that neck.
You know what? That's really interesting point. So we've seen some of these fighters that have had gas tank issues in the past or have some type of disadvantage in a fight change their style. I always go back to Paulo Costa against Israel Adesanya. Not that I ever thought Paulo Costa was going to win that fight, but he didn't give himself a chance because his only chance at winning that fight was to rush in, use what he does best, big blitzing power shots. But instead he said, no, I'm scared of the gas tank. Let me sit here at range with the greatest at range striker ever and see how long it takes to get knocked out. And of course, he did. Walt Harris's biggest strength is he can come in those first 2 minutes like a tornado and mop people up. But after those first 2 minutes, I'm not talking 2 rounds, 2 minutes. After those first 2 minutes, his gas tank tends to empty, and then he loses a lot of fights, including some to guys that aren't even in the UFC anymore because they weren't all that good that have beaten Walt Harris. But if he tries to make the same mistake of, hey, I'm going to pace myself and stay at range against Alexander Volkov, it could really backfire for him. I'm starting to like Volkov a little more too. I wish I knew he was going to try to use that strategy for sure. Then I'd really like Volkov.
This is one of those spots that I just have to stand my ground on. This could be a spot. Now, last week, I bet against Jimmy the Brute Crute. I've got to eat that crow. I look real stupid sitting here betting against Jimmy the Brute Crute. But the whole point of my bet on Modestas was he has to survive round one. If he gets out of round one, this is a fight. This is going to be a great fight. He's live. It's the same thing here with Volkov, except this time I'm getting the better of the two fighters. I'm not laying dog money on a guy who's got a prayer if he can survive. I'm laying the chalk with a guy who is head and shoulders the better of the two fighters. He just may not be the better of the two athletes. So if he can wear Walt Harris down, if he can survive that first 3 minutes, that early onslaught, I think he just takes over. Whether he cruises to a decision or whether he finishes this guy, I think this is a Volkov all-day spot. And I think the narrative and I think how much of a great guy Walt Harris is has got people betting on him early. If you're going to bet a puncher's chance, in my opinion, you're going to need more than plus 140 because that's really Walt's only path to victory here.
You know what I'm going to do is I'm going to bet Volkov, but I'm going to bet him inside the distance. I'm not going to bet him by KO or by submission. I'm just going to bet him inside the distance because I'm with you. I actually think his sub game is underrated and he could definitely get there. I just think Walt Harris doesn't have that same heart, determination, or cardio to go 3 hard rounds with a guy that's going to kick him his hard and hit him with as many big, huge, stiff jabs like Volkov is. I think when it starts to get real ugly in the fight, just like in the Overeem fight, he's just going to check out. And whether it comes via submission or strikes, I think I'm just going to take Volkov inside the distance because I think you'll get a tiny little plus like that. Either that or you'll end up laying like minus 110.
I like it. I like it. And, I hope I didn't cost you anything there because I know it's easy to get gun shy. When you see the positives of a fighter and they burn you a few times, it's real easy to shell up and not want to trust them with your money again. So glad to hear you're rolling with me, and let's just hope for a round 2 knockout so we don't have to sweat it any further than that.
That's right. Well, it's going to be a scary 2 minutes.
Very scary 2 minutes. All right. We have got 502 live viewers. We broke the 500 mark. Thank you all so much for everything. I appreciate each and every one of you here on the Die Hard MMA podcast. We're all about good vibes, positivity, having fun watching the best sport in the world. And don't forget, kids, bankroll management. Bet responsibly and never bet more than you're able to lose. Once again, I've got to introduce my special guest here. I keep pointing the wrong way. We've got Matt Holt, the president of US Integrity. This is Odds HQ. Do me a favor, hit that like button. Your co-main event for UFC 254. Robert the Reaper Whittaker coming back against Jared Cannonier. Holy crap. This is another fight that I got on, and I got on early, Matt, and unfortunately the line has moved ever so slightly against me. Robert Whittaker is a fighter that I think is just a little cooked at this point. He ruled over the division for a long time. He's got every skill you would ever want to have, and he had 2 full 25-minute wars with Yoel Romero, something that literally no other man on the planet, I think, would be able to say. And he came out the other side still alive somehow. But I think it's caught up with him. In his last fight against Darren Till, yes, he got it done. Yes, he won, but he got dropped in that fight, and it was scary. You saw his eyes roll a little bit. I think the vaunted durability of Robert Whittaker has reached its end, and now he's taking on Jared Cannonier, a guy who literally packs a heavyweight punch inside inside of middleweight's body. This guy started his career at heavyweight, knocked people out there, got serious with his dieting, dropped to 205, knocked people out there, and then somehow has gotten all the way down to 185. And he is just power incarnate. When you look at this guy, there's not an ounce of fat on him. And he may be a little strange. He may be a little, he's got some interesting takes on life and beliefs, but it works for him. And he gets in there. He has no quit. He is so hard to take down. He is so physically strong. And his striking, technically speaking, is coming along. He went in there with Anderson Silva and was able to pick apart the greatest of all time. And on top of that, he chopped him down with these monstrous leg kicks that just stole the day for him. I think Whittaker is probably the better fighter in this spot, but not by much at this point. And the power advantage is very clearly on Jared Cannonier's side of things. I think Robert Whittaker gets clipped some point in round 2, and I think he goes down hard, Matt. How are you looking at this one?
This one's tricky for me. I think, at the time, sometimes, to your point, MMA just kind of passes people by. And at the time when they're in those fights, you think, gosh, these are such big fights. Jacare and Derek Brunson. Even when he fought Rafael Natal, Natal was kind of hot at the time. Uriah Hall, when he was still hot and had that amazing striking game. Brad Tavares, when he was still a hot prospect. All these guys Whittaker beat at the time, you're like, oh, Brad Tavares, Rafael Natal, Derek Brunson, they just haven't aged that well. But at the time, they all felt like such big wins. And, it felt like Whittaker was a superstar beating all these big guys who since it hasn't looked too good. And I thought that Till fight was wide open going into that 5th round and that Till was winning that 5th round until, Whittaker gets a little knocked down in the 5th. It kind of changes the tide. It was more of a slip. And then suddenly here we are. And he gets the nod in a fight that I thought was really close. And Till's a big welterweight. So, I mean, there's a big difference between fighting a blown-up welterweight and fighting a light heavyweight here who's a legit light heavyweight. So I think that Whittaker has to fight a perfect fight. His boxing's certainly crisp enough. He could certainly move out of the way and out-volume Jared Cannonier here, but it's amazing that we're talking about Robert Whittaker with one path to victory, fighting a perfect fight, using his speed, momentum, and footwork to stay on the outside and outwork Jared Cannonier. And in a pick'em fight, it's Cannonier who we're saying all the other paths to victory kind of lie through him. It's really hard to take Whittaker in this spot. To me, it's Cannonier or pass. I just haven't got there yet.
I mean, I already put my money where my mouth is. I'm on Cannonier, and I did go 2 units deep on this one again. I got him at minus 121, so I'm 2.4 units in to win 2. And I love Robert Whittaker as much as the next guy. I just think his time has come. I think his time has passed. And if you want to hear another thing that makes me a little bit more confident, the dude with the crystal ball who's just called every single shot he's ever taken, Israel Adesanya believes that Jared is going to win this fight. And if that's not enough to tip you over the edge, I really don't know what is. He's been in there with Whittaker. He's analyzed both of them for quite some time, apparently. He's been watching over his division, and he believes that Cannonier's the dude with the stuff to get it done. Working over there with the MMA lab, I don't expect Cannonier to give up takedowns. He's too physically strong, and like I said, even if Rob does have solid wrestling on him, in pure wrestling, that power matters. I don't know if he'll be able to get him to the floor. So sure, maybe he's got a jiu-jitsu edge, but I don't know if he'll ever be able to use it. And then like you said, on the feet, he might be a little bit more slick in the boxing. But by how much? And those leg kicks coming on the other side, That's going to be something I think he'll be able to go to, Cannonier that is, in this fight, and use that weapon once again to slow down the more mobile Rob Whittaker. And whenever they get in close, Whittaker is so hittable. He relies on those blitz attacks. And you mentioned Darren Till. I want to talk on that for a minute. Darren Till is one of my least favorite fighters in the UFC. I think he is completely overhyped. The dude has low output, he relies on the big bomb, and he's not even that big of a power puncher at 185. At 170, he could take people's heads off. At 185, he's just a run-of-the-mill guy. For me, Whittaker beating Darren Till is not a big statement, and him going, life and death with Darren Till, being bloodied up, almost being knocked out, being dragged through another 3-round war, that doesn't sit well with me. I think all signs point to Cannonier, and I'm okay with laying a little bit of chalk on him here in this spot.
Yeah, and I don't blame you. The one thing I will say, and I'm going to be interested throughout the week, Robert Whittaker, obviously a much more well-known commodity here. I wonder if there's not a point throughout the wagering window because of the amount of people that are just going to come to bet this card because of Gaethje and Khabib, if Whittaker doesn't attract some of that money. Oh, I didn't even know Whittaker's the co-main. And then suddenly we see Whittaker flip to 120, because if I can get Cannonier at plus anything, I'm much more interested.
I completely agree with that move. Right now he's sitting about minus 110. It's pretty much a pick 'em across the board. He opened at plus 100, so unless you jumped on it extremely early or unless that money flows in on Whittaker, you might not get that plus sign. But I'll be honest with you, I don't usually go any further than 2 units. It's either 1 unit or 2 units for me. Those are kind of the only 2 things I do. I would be very tempted to put a 3rd unit on him if I got plus money on Cannonier here in this spot.
Yeah, that'll certainly make me feel better about it.
And it's time, folks. It is the main event. We have 520 live viewers. That is a record for us here at Odds HQ. And I'm sorry, not Odds HQ, because Jimmy the Bag does his horse racing streams, and those get views like no one's business. But for the MMA side of things, I think that's a record. It's my personal record. So thank you all for hanging out with me. Y'all are awesome. I appreciate you chilling here with me. Once again, I've got my sidekick here, Matt Holt, who is our esteemed guest. Thank you for spending your evening breaking down UFC 254 with us. And the time has come. Khabib the Eagle Nurmagomedov, yes, I have practiced that last name, taking on Justin the Highlight Gaethje. We've got Khabib, the perfect 28-0 fighter, one of the few, one of the only truly undefeated fighters in mixed martial arts, competing at the top, highest level. And then Gaethje, 22-2 on the flip side of this thing, challenging for the undisputed title. Matt, this is the fight. Like, not only do we finally have just a huge title fight here, the return of Khabib, maybe the only title fight that's more exciting than Conor and Khabib too, but it's a unification. We've got the interim title holder versus the true champion. Talk to me about this fight. How do you feel about this one?
Look, on paper, when you break down this fight, Justin Gaethje should have as good, if not a better chance to beat Khabib than anybody else ever has. And, and Khabib, we know, is as motivated than ever. From everyone I've talked to that's around Khabib, that knows Khabib, knows that his motivation has never waned for a second. What I wonder, though, is how is he going to react to not having his father in his corner? Because, look, that's been kind of the rock in his whole life. Him and his dad had this plan. Be the greatest ever. Win the title. Get to 30-0 and then retire. He's 28-0. This would be 29. He says he doesn't want to fight again after. Everything about this is so important. But I wonder, what does not having his dad along for the journey anymore mean? And we are in the betting world. It's not our jobs to figure out how to write a good story, how to build a storyline. It's how to make money while we enjoy this amazing sport. And at the end of the day, we have to lay 3-1 with Khabib. And there is a big, giant question mark out there. How is he going to perform finally after his dad passes? Look, anyone who's ever been that close to a father or a mother, and I think most people are naturally close, but I mean really, really tight. I mean, how do you react when that person passes? And this wasn't now a year ago or 2 years ago. This was just a couple of months ago. So Khabib had to prep for what seemingly is the biggest fight of his career, the most challenging fight of his career, while mourning the loss of the closest person in his life, his dad, his trainer, his mentor. That leaves a lot of unanswered questions to me. And like you talked about with Walt Harris, maybe this is a great story, but fairy tales don't always come true. You don't always get to write that storybook ending. And if he is not 100% laser focused, Justin Gaethje has iron in both fists and can easily put his lights out at any time.
Yeah, and I know that's going to be something people hear all week is Khabib's dad, Khabib's dad. I hope the interviewers stop asking him about it because I can't imagine the pain that that poor guy is in talking about his father passing and every beat writer in the game trying to turn it into their headline. It's got to take a toll, and we've seen fighters who have lost family members and close people in their lives. They react two ways. Either they use it as motivation and they come out like we've never seen them before, or they just kind of wilt a little bit. Or in the case, I'm sorry, there's a third leg. On the Walt Harris fight, there was a huge adrenaline dump. He used it as motivation. Now, he's already got a suspect gas tank. I don't think that's going to be the story with Khabib. But he did have a gigantic adrenaline dump after he came out looking to, take out all that rage and emotion on his opponent. So I don't know personally if Khabib is going to go that route. I think he's going to try to stay measured. I think he's going to try to stay composed. What I am worried about is the little things that happen in that camp. When you're training and your dad cracks the whip because he ruled that camp with an iron fist. When he's not there to say, push a little harder. When he's not there to say, run one more mile. Is Khabib doing that himself? Did Khabib bring the bear in to wrestle for this training camp? Is he swimming upriver this camp? I don't know if he's doing those above and beyond things. We might see a 1 or 2% less Khabib. And in my opinion, Matt, that might be enough of a window for Justin Gaethje.
I agree. And what I also think is interesting about this fight is the total. So I haven't bet Gaethje yet, although I'm starting to lean toward it. Again, because I don't know that Khabib's at 100%, yet they're pricing this fight as if Khabib's at 105%. Like he's really at peak. Minus 300 steep for a guy like Justin Gaethje on the other side, especially the way that he's looked now fighting out of that elevation fight team out of Colorado. That was a perfect fit for Justin Gaethje and everything
like
he's trying to do.
Camp right now.
Oh God, they're hot right there right now. And so I think I also like the under in this fight, though, at a pretty good clip, because I think one of two things is going to happen. If Khabib is at 100%, nobody can really stop his wrestling. And then at the end of the day, there's a good chance that Gaethje may get stopped. As much as we all love Justin Gaethje, he did get stopped in both of his losses. This isn't a guy who, his style just kind of goes to stop or get stopped. And in both his losses, he did get stopped. On the other side, if Khabib is only 80% because he had to deal with mourning the loss of his dad, which changed his life and changed his training camps and changed the way he prepares, and look, there's just things you have to deal with when a loved one passes that just eats up time and energy and just your soul out of your body. If he is less than 100% and Justin Gaethje catches him, let's face it, Justin Gaethje's last, I think, 6 wins now or by knockout. This is a guy who puts people to sleep, period. And if Khabib can't get that chain wrestling going, and for some reason Gaethje's able to stand, I don't see Khabib lasting 3 rounds in a stand-up match against Justin Gaethje. So I think there's probably some value in the under here too, maybe under 4.5 rounds.
I can absolutely see that. The only issue for me is the under 4.5 looks like it's heavily juiced, minus 170, minus 180, something like that.
Oh, is that what it's up to now?
It looks like it. You're going to have to pay for it if you want that under 4.5. And
you're right, 80. Yeah.
Not the business I'm in necessarily, because I would not be shocked if this fight makes it to the judges' scorecards, believe it or not. Because Justin Gaethje, I know everyone's talked about it. I know we've all seen the countdown show. This dude is a wrestler first. He knows how to wrestle. He just never uses it in his fights. So we know
Ever.
Khabib is unstoppable. Khabib is gonna get a takedown on Justin. I think Justin stands a chance, better than anybody else so far, of causing that scramble and getting back up to his feet, which is going to extend the fight. So if Khabib eventually does get him down and Justin's able to stay safe, because Khabib is more of a mauler, he doesn't immediately go for the finish. He likes to beat people up down there, and when they give up their neck, then he'll take it, but it's usually later in the game. I can see Justin surviving, getting to the next round or getting back up to his feet and doing the whole thing over again. I can see a very, very late finish. I'm talking round 4 or round 5. If he does have what it takes to actually wear out Khabib and then clip him late in the fight, he could get the knockdown. Or honestly, I could see Justin Gaethje winning this thing by decision. Just being the more technical striker, being able to land the damage, and if he's able to escape the grappling and mitigate what Khabib can do on the floor, the judges are going to score those rounds for him. So I think that Justin Gaethje has a really good shot of actually pulling the upset here. The only reason I haven't bet it is because it is a landslide of Khabib money right now. I'm going to wait for that line to peak. I'm going to get Justin Gaethje at plus 315 if I can get it up that high. And then I will take it. And I'm honestly interested in Justin Gaethje by decision as a little sprinkle. And then I'll probably do an insurance of Justin Gaethje in rounds 4 and round 5, just in case he manages to pull off that big highlight reel knockout again.
Well, if Justin Gaethje does it, it'll be the first time in his last 10 wins that he goes the distance. 9 straight wins by knockout for Justin Gaethje. The last time he won by anything other than knockout, 2014 versus Melvin Guillard. That's been a long time ago. But maybe you're right. Maybe you're onto something.
I have an angle for you, though, there, Matt. I'm glad you mentioned that, because if you look at his last fight against Tony Ferguson, we are not watching the Justin Gaethje of 4 years ago. We are watching the mythical creature known as champion Justin Gaethje. He went to Trevor Whitman and he said, okay, I'm done with the brain damage talk. I'm done with collecting the fight of the night bonuses. I want the strap. I want to be the best fighter on the planet. Make me that. And that's why this whole thing works, is because Trevor Whitman is such a sharp mind. He's got the brain, and Gaethje is a controller for him. He does literally everything that his genius-level coach tells him to. Against Tony Ferguson, he picked apart, technically, the best fighter he's ever fought, and he embarrassed Tony Ferguson in a way that we have just never seen happen before, because he's completely revamped his game. He's taking the power off of his punches to piece them up, and Tony didn't get flatlined. Tony's eyes didn't roll into the back of his head. It wasn't like Barboza where he caught him with a big shot and just absolutely dropped him. The referee stopped it with a mercy call. He waved it off while Tony Ferguson was still standing. Tony was still
Tony
in that
was
fight.
kind of waving it off too.
Tony, don't get me wrong, he was hurt, but Tony's heart wouldn't let him actually get out of there. He was hanging on. I think it was a good stoppage. I think Tony would have taken just more damage. But my point is that Gaethje was fighting to win 5 rounds. He wasn't fighting for the highlight. He was fighting to piece his opponent apart for a full 25 minutes. And I think with that attitude, with that level of focus and training, I think he's in the right spot to go 5 rounds with Khabib. And he might give 1 or 2 of them up with the takedowns, but he'll have the gas left in his tank because he didn't go for broke in the second round. He'll be able to come back in round 4 and round 5, reset, get back to the technical side of things. I wouldn't be shocked if this one makes it to the cards.
Maybe. Great point. Look, Clint, I gotta run. I'm already late for dinner with my
Sorry
CEO.
we went long.
That's all right. No, it's awesome, man. Look, love the card this week. Super pumped up.
Thanks for having us, Matt. We appreciate you coming on the show. You enjoy your dinner, and we'll see you next time.
Appreciate it. Thanks, everybody. Best of luck this weekend.
All right. There you have it. Thank you all so much for hanging out with me and Matt this evening. The show went a little long tonight because we were having fun talking about some awesome fights. We set a record. We got 542 live viewers. That's so great. I appreciate you all so much. like I said here on the podcast, we do positivity, we do bankroll management, we try not to be that toxic influence that you see all those people over on Twitter. So this weekend, just remember, people are wagering money. A lot of people are just having fun watching fights, but try not to add to the trolling that MMA is so known for. I'm going to go ahead and recap my picks here that I've already got locked in, because I've got several bets already, and I am just so pumped up for this card, and I'm looking to bounce back in a big way. So I've got Tai Tuivasa at plus 110. I'm taking the big dog in Sam Alvey at plus 310. I have laid 2.42 units on Jared Cannonier to win 2. I have laid 3.34 units on Alexander Volkov to win 2. So I've got 2 big 2x plays already, and if I can get a half decent line, Matt has kind of talked me on to taking care of Shavkat Rahkmonov, so I'm probably going to be jumping on that dog right after the show is over. Once again, nothing but love. I appreciate you all. You all go have a great evening, a great rest of your week. I will have Total Madness coming out later this week right here on odds.com, where I re-go over the fight. We talk overs and unders instead of side picks here. Then we'll have the post-weigh-in recap, which is still undefeated and saved us a unit last week by hedging off of a fighter that we got a little suspect of. And then my boys right here on odds.com do the MMA roundtable. That will be Friday evening. And of course, the fights are Saturday. You have a great week. You are awesome. Make sure you give somebody out there an internet high five. Stay safe. Nothing but love. Let's roll.